So, confession time. I'm a rare and mythical creature in the student affairs profession. Pleased to meet you. So when I was in college, confessions and when I was in college, sounds dangerous, right? I was not an RA. I was not an orientation leader. I was not involved in student government. I wasn't even a tour guide. I was not involved in any student organizations. And you're thinking, what? I'm a student affairs professional that was completely disengaged and uninvolved during my college experience. But folks, that is precisely why I felt called to student affairs. So one of the things that has been asked of me throughout my life is, what are you? So this is how I came to understand the experience of students who don't feel like they quite fit, who don't feel like they fit the mold. By the time emo Anna up there was about 16 years old, she had been asked, what are you? Many, countless times. This is a question that demands that you explain yourself so that people can try to fit you into the right box. Oftentimes when asked, what are you, I would start to explain, but they often like to interject and guess. Filipina, right? You got a little Asian in you, right? Whew. When I had these interactions, I felt uncomfortable, often angry, but always frustrated. But, of course, trained after many experiences, I would dutifully start to explain the many various races, ethnicities, and cultures in which I was raised. And inevitably, again, they would interrupt and say, okay, that's fine, but what are you really? I mean, what do you feel like the most? Now, if you had to rank order them, so ultimately, what was not understood is that I feel and I am Chinese, Cuban, Italian, Brazilian, all at the same time. I can't rank order or choose or categorize these identities, just like you are all you, I am all me, maybe with a few more frequent flyer miles. But ultimately, this left me in an awkward position, right? Now, nowadays, we take into account that we can see images of diverse ethnicity and multiracial identity anywhere that we look on TVs, movies, ads, campaigns, and this is one of my favorites. The United Colors of Benetton ad campaign of the 1990s. Anyone? I know I'm dating myself. I love this campaign because it reflected for me and helped to normalize folks that were probably experiencing some of the same things as me. I saw these big, beautiful images of people of diversity and also multiracial people that maybe had experienced some of the things that I had just described to you. But ethnic diversity has increased as time's gone on, right? And sometimes I feel as though my ethnic ambiguity that was so often questioned is no longer that noticeable. I'm certainly not getting that pesky question anymore. Maybe it's the look I give. But white privilege, in my case, white passing privilege, it was a very disturbing realization about my identity to which I had to come to terms in graduate school. My passing whiteness was like a mask that I would forget I was wearing. In a space of different people, for example, a group of Latinas, I would so comfortably slip right into, hola chica, ¿cómo están? ¿Qué tal? And then I would be met with surprised and confused looks, kind of like those that I just got. Yeah, I'm used to that. But I had to figure out this disconnect between how I felt inside and how others perceived me. And this was pretty uncomfortable. Then I realized that I could leverage it. I felt like a spy. I could infiltrate unguarded conversations because this white enough face speaking non-accented English could slip in undetected. I started to realize I could challenge and reframe from within. It became my new superpower. But before all of that, back in college, I just felt like the odd one out. I was not white enough for some groups and not ethnic enough for others. Everybody around me seemed to be finding their niche, finding their people, fitting in, and yet I couldn't quite find a place where I felt whole, where I could feel comfortable in all of my identities. I kept having to choose who and what to be in each space, depending on who I was with and where I was. Usually, I just ended up as other. This vast wasteland of ambiguity and disinterest. It is profoundly frustrating to continuously have to identify as other. It's like you don't matter. Your story has no relevance, and your complexity is inconvenient. This is precisely why I feel called to this profession. I'm committed to finding those students who, like me, feel like the mythical creatures, the untapped potential of those that maybe aren't showing up at the traditional spaces, aren't involved in the traditional ways, but have so much untapped potential. It's your job and mine to find these students, engage them in a way that reflects and celebrates their full identities, and helps them live that full potential. In the spirit of confessions, I want to tell you about a mistake I made about 10 years ago when I was a new professional. You know, sometimes the mistakes we make aren't huge and splashy. Sometimes they are. But they're oftentimes the mistakes we make when we don't recognize the full dignity of the people with whom we interact. So as a new professional, I was in charge of an orientation session for new international students. I thought, I got this. And as I was envisioning what this event would look like, I thought, oh, beautiful. I'm going to make it a mini United Nations with flags everywhere representing all the various countries. So I looked everyone up and found from their immigration documents the country they were coming from, splashed the beautiful flags everywhere. It really looked fabulous. But as I'm sitting there at check-in, I'm handing out these beautiful nameplates I had made with the students' flags on them and their name. And I'm getting a little surprised. I'm handing out these nameplates, and I'm realizing that some of these students look really different than I expected. They don't really match what my expectations were. I'm also sensing a sense of unease from these students, but it's orientation, new country, new culture, new school, that's expected. I kind of brushed it off. I said, we're going to get into it, and it's going to be great. So as the students start to tell their stories, because we had intros, we had stories, we had icebreakers, naturally, I started to have this growing sense, this pit, in the pit of my stomach just started to grow with unease and guilt. Some students told stories of immigrating to this country or to other countries, leaving behind family, leaving behind culture, leaving behind all the things that they knew and remembered in search of a better life or fleeing from something. And some students told stories of discrimination and of state-sanctioned persecution that they faced. So by putting those flags on their nameplates, I had labeled them. I had decided who they were before they had an opportunity to tell their story. I had failed to recognize the complexities of nationality, of race, of globalization that all play into identity. I had the best of intentions. I wanted to welcome them, and I had done the exact opposite. So, if I, a multiracial, multinational, multi-ethnic, multilingual, immigrant woman, could make this mistake, who among us can claim to have it all figured out and to be able to do it on our own? Listen first. Don't make assumptions. It's so important to encourage our students to tell their stories, to make sure that they have an opportunity to tell us the full breadth and depth of complexity that makes up their identities, nationality, race, ethnicity, gender identity, all of it. It's all operating within the same space. And we shouldn't need sharp spikes and changes in our national demographics to force us to look at this issue. People have been complex and layered in their identities forever. Seems to be a popular topic nowadays, though, and that's good, but we got to catch up. The US Department of Education says that by 2020, 47% of US high school graduates will be people of color, which means that within a short span of time, the majority of the US population will be people of color and multiracial people. Shout out. It also means that this will soon be the population on our campuses. And are we ready for that? We should have been. We need to get there. Are we deepening the complexity and knowledge base that we have about culture, intersectionality? Are we deepening our awareness? Are we sophisticating the way that we collect data and use that data about our students to inform the work that we do, to make sure that we are acknowledging and celebrating the full breadth of who they are and what they bring to the table? It's more critical now than ever that we do this, that we question our own identities, that we tell our stories, and make sure that we are helping them tell theirs. The question I've been asked most in my life is, what are you, as I mentioned? These days, I have a much more robust answer. And I have the language and the experience to talk about myself, my identities, and to own all of them. But this is what we must do for our students, because it took a lot of people encouraging me and fostering me and challenging me along the way to get me to that point. We have to make sure that we are telling our stories, encouraging our students to do the same. And ultimately, it is us that has to be the champions of intersectionality, the champions of multiple identities, and make sure that our students are truly able to live to their full potential. Thank you.